All right, and we are live. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to this live St. Patrick's Day reading. We really appreciate you all being here. We're so excited that you're here to celebrate this with us. And we will get started in just a few minutes to let other people trickle in and log on. So thank you so much, and we'll get started in just a bit. All right, as we're waiting just a couple more minutes for people to trickle in, I'll go ahead and set the mood with some little bit of Celtic music. All right. On that note, we will go ahead and get started. Let me take this off for the reading. All right. Thank you so much for everyone who is here, everyone who is able to join and tune in. We are so excited to have you here to listen to what we've got to share today. And just to kind of introduce this event and kind of the idea behind it, as many of you likely know, St. Patrick's Day has been observed as a cherished religious holiday in Ireland for more than 1,000 years to commemorate the saint who is said to have brought Christianity to the Isle. Over the years, the holiday has grown in both scope and popularity, and is now seen by many as not only a celebration of the saint himself, but also of Irish culture and mythology at large. In that spirit, 6 members of Stories on the Hill have prepared a very special live reading of some of the most beloved fairy tales, folklore, and poetry in Irish history. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. We'll open with an introductory poem read by Olivia Bernard.
St. Patrick's Day by Jean Blewett. There's an isle, a green isle, set in the sea. Here's to the saint that blessed it. And here's to the billows, wild and free, that for centuries have caressed it. Here's to the day when the men that roam send longing eyes o'er the water. Here's to the land that still spells home to each loyal son and daughter. Here's to old Ireland, fair, I ween, with the blue skies stretched above her. And here's to her shamrock, warm and green, and here's to the hearts that love her.
Thank you so much, Olivia. Way to bring us into the whole event and the day. Thank you. All right, so next up, we will have a story read that's a classic fairy tale performed by Mallory Hallworth. So Mallory, whenever you're ready, take it away.
The Fairy Dance. One evening late in November, which is the month when spirits have the most power over all things, as the prettiest girl in the island was going to the well for water, her foot slipped and she fell. It was an unlucky omen, and when she got up and looked round, it seemed to her as if she were in a strange place, and all around her changed as if by some enchantment. But at some distance she saw a great crowd gathered round a blazing fire, and she was drawn slowly on towards them, till at last she stood in the very midst of the people. But they kept silence, looking fixedly at her, and she was afraid, and tried to turn and leave them, but she could not. Then a beautiful youth, like a prince with a red sash and a golden band on his long yellow hair, came up and asked her to dance. "It is a foolish thing of you, sir, to ask me to dance," she said, "when there is no music." Then she lifted his hand and made a sign to the people, and instantly the sweetest music sounded near her and round her. And the young man took her hand, and they danced and danced till the moon and the stars went down, and she seemed like one on the floating air, and she forgot everything in the world except the dancing and the sweet low music and her beautiful partner. At last the dancing ceased, and her partner thanked her and invited her to supper with the company. Then she saw an opening in the ground and a flight of steps, and the young man, who seemed to be like the king amongst them all, led her down and followed by the whole company. At the end of the stairs she came upon a large hall, all bright and beautiful with gold and silver and lights, and the table was covered with everything good to eat, and wine was poured in golden cups for them to drink. When she sat down, they all pressed her to eat the food and drink the wine, and she was weary after dancing. She took the golden cup the prince handed her and raised it to her lips to drink. Just then a man passed close to her and whispered, "Eat no food and drink no wine, or you will never reach your home again." So she laid the cup down and refused to drink. On this they were very angry, and a great noise arose, and a fierce, dark man stood up and said, "Whoever comes to us must drink with us." And he seized her arm and held the wine to her lips so that she almost died of fright. But at that moment a red-haired man came up and took her by the hand and led her out. "You are safe for this time," he said. "Take this herb and hold it in your hand till you reach home and no one can harm you." And he gave her a branch called the Fairytales. This she took and fled away along the sward in the dark night, but all the time she heard footsteps behind her in pursuit. At last she reached home and barred the door and went to bed, when a great clamor arose outside, and voices were heard crying to her, "The power they had over you is gone through the magic of the herb, but wait, when you dance again to the music on the hill, you will stay with us evermore, and none shall hinder." However, she kept the magic branch safely, and the fairies never troubled her more. And it was long and long before the sound of the fairy music left her ears, which she had danced to that November night on the hillside with her fairy lover.
Yay! Thank you so much, Mallory. Another beautiful job done on that fairy tale. Thank you. All right, and next up we have Hannah Davies reading a classic poem for you.
The Leprechaun or Fairy Shoemaker by William Allingham. Little cowboy, what have you heard? Up on the lonely raft's green mound, only the plaintive yellow bird, sighing in sultry fields around. Cherry, 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 chee, only the grasshopper and the bee. Tip-tap, rip-rap, tick-a-tack too, scarlet leather sewn together, this will make a shoe. Left, right, pull it tight, summer days are warm, underground in winter, laughing at the storm. Lay your ear close to the hill. Do you not catch the tiny clamor? Busy click of an elfin hammer? Voice of the leprechaun singing shrill, as he merrily plies his trade? He's a span and a quarter in height. Get him in sight and hold him tight, and you're a made man. You watch your cattle the summer day, sup on potatoes, sleep in the hay. How would you like to roll in your carriage, look for a Dutch's daughter in marriage? Seize the shoemaker, then you may. Big boots a-huntin', sandals in the hall. White for a wedding feast, pink for a ball. This way, that way. So we make a shoe, getting rich every stitch. Tick-a-tack too. 99 treasure crocks. This keen miser fairy hath. Hid in mountains, woods and rock, rune and round tower, cave and rath, and where the cruminants build from times of old, guarded by him, each of them filled full to the brim with gold. I caught him at work one day, myself, in a castle ditch where foxglove grows, a wrinkled, wizen, bearded elf, spectacles stuck on his pointed nose, silver buckle in his hose, leather apron, shoe in his lap, rip-rap, tip-tap, tick-a-tack too, a grasshopper on my cap, away the moth flew, buskins for a fairy prince, brogues for his son, pay me well, when the job is done. The rogue was mine, beyond a doubt. I stared at him, he stared at me. Servant, sir, humph, says he, and he pulled a snuff box out. He took a long pinch, looked better pleased. The little leprechaun off the box with a whimsical grace. Poof! He flung the dust in my face, and while I sneezed, achoo, was gone.
Awesome, Hannah. Thank you so much for that rendition of such a poem about such a classic figure. Thank you. All right, so next up we have Bailey Roberts, who will be reading another fairy tale for you.
All right, the many talents of the harp of Dagda. After the second battle of Moytura, Nada, the high king of Tuatha De Danann, was grievously injured. And as it was the law among the people that a king must be whole of body, Dagda took his place. Mighty Dagda, of whom the ballads are sung, he was called the father of Tuatha, the lord of knowledge, the many-skilled, the maker and the man of the peak, had in his possession many beautiful and wondrous things. He had a deadly club that could kill 9 men with one blow, a tree whose branches were forever bent with fruit, 2 pigs, one of which grew bigger while the other was roasting, the cauldron called Undre, from which no man could walk away from unsatisfied, and which was said to be able to heal all wounds, and a magical harp, the 4-angled music, named Euthane. Of all the eldritch artifacts at his command, the harp was the most revered, for with it he put the 4 seasons in their right order, and could ready warriors for battle. Carved of the first oak tree and inlaid with gold and precious jewels, its music was fit to make an angel weep or dance. Sorrows of the heart, mind and body melted like ice under a warm spring sun at the sound of its delicate tones. Well, it so happened that during the second battle of Moytura, the wicked Fomorians heard the sound of the harp and were caught in the magic of its music, and the Fomor chief knew he must have it. So himself and his men waited until the battle was again joined and the Dagda's house was left unguarded, before creeping silently within and stealing the harp. They leapt out the windows of the Dagda's house and ran as though their heels were on fire, leaving behind the battle and making their way to an abandoned fortress nearby. Although their terrible King Balor was leading their forces, they left him behind too, so enchanted were they by the harp. They hung it on a wall and waited to see the outcome of the battle. Balor was slain and the Fomors were broken, and the remnants of their army trickled into the old fortress in dribs and drabs, drawing comfort from the harp, so that before too long there was a large muster of warriors encamped, their golden bronze spears still red with Tuthala blood. The Daydan, flushed with victory, full of food and mead from the cauldron Undri, called for music from Dagda's harp, but were aghast to find it gone missing. The golden tongue of my harp has been stolen, said the Dagda, but it will sing no sweet songs for the thieves, answering only to my touch. Who here will help me get it back? Ogma the maker, who first wrote the runes of Ogham, stood up despite his exhaustion and said he'd join the cause, as did Liu of the long arm, and off the three marched, brandishing spears sharp enough to wound the wind and set it to wailing. The trio came upon the dark and mournful Fomorian camp and saw their enemies were many, and Ogma and Liu wondered greatly how they'd get the harp back. But Dagda stood up boldly and cried out, "Come to me, my four-angled music." And what did the harp do but bound from the wall and crash straight through the Fomorians, killing 7 and wounding more. To the very hand of Dagda it flew, but the Fomors weren't to be cheated of their last prize, and they were close behind it. "It is time for some music," said Ogma, and Dagda Mor agreed. Putting his fingers to the strings of the harp, he began playing a merry, littling tune, which set the advancing Fomors to laughing and dancing. So hard did they laugh that their goblets of wine fell from shaking fingers and their weapons dropped to the floor. But when the music ended, they picked them up again and advanced with a grim gleam in their eyes. "It is time," said Liu, "for some music," and Dagda nodded, playing this time a sorrowful song of mourning. The Fomors sat on the ground holding their heads and weeping, for although they were cold and hard people, not given to sentimentality, they couldn't help but recall all the warriors slain in the recent battle, and they were overcome with misery. But when the song ended, up they got and came at the trio with rage and furious oaths at their lips. "It is time," said Dagda, "for one last melody." And with that, he began playing the sweet, soft music of sleep. Not a man among the Fomors was strong enough to resist, and they curled up where they stood, fast asleep. From that day forth, none ever tried to steal the Dagda's harp again.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bailey. That was wonderful. All right. And next up, we have Olivia Bernard reading another poem that's a little bit more modern than the others, but was voted Ireland's top favorite poem in 1999, I believe. So I will let her unveil that and read it for you. Olivia, whenever you're ready.
The Lake of Innisfree by W.B. Yeats. I will arise and go now, and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin build there, of clay and wattles made. 9 bean rows will I have there, a hive for the honey bee, and live alone in the bee-loud glade. And I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dropping from the vales of the morning to where the cricket sings. There midnight's all a glimmer, and noon a purple glow, and evening full of the linnet's wings. I will arise and go now, for always night and day. I hear lake water lapping with low sounds by the shore. While I stand on the roadway or on the pavements gray, I hear it in the deep heart's core.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. Awesome. Awesome job, guys. Okay. And next up, we have another wonderful story for you. We're read by one of our wonderful narrators. And this one will be read by Ali Imran. So Ali, whenever you're ready.
The story is called Fairy Help the Fuka from the book Ancient Legends of Ireland. The Fuka is a friendly being and often helps the farmer at his work if he is treated well and kindly. One day, a farmer's son was minding cattle in the field when something rushed past him like the wind. But he was not frightened, for he knew it was the Fuka on his way to the old mill by the moat where the fairies met every night. So he called out, Fuka, Fuka, show me what you are like. I'll give you my big coat to keep you warm. Then a young bull came to him, lashing his tail like mad. But Frederick threw the coat over him, and in a moment he was quiet as a lamb, and told the boy to come to the mill that night when the moon was up, and he would have good luck. So Frederick went, but saw nothing except sacks of corn all lying about on the ground, for the men had fallen asleep, and no work was done. Then he lay down also and slept, for he was very tired, and when he woke up early in the morning, there was all the meal ground, although certainly the men had not done it, for they still slept. And this happened for 3 nights, after which Frederick determined to keep awake and watch. Now there was an old chest in the mill, and he crept into this to hide, and just looked through the keyhole to see what would happen. And exactly at midnight, 6 little fellows came in, each carrying a sack of corn upon his back, and after them came an old man in tattered rags of clothes. And he bade them turn the mill, and they turned and turned till all was ground. Then Frederick ran to tell his father, and the miller determined to watch the next night with his son, and both together saw the same thing happen again. Now, said the farmer, I see it is the Fuka's work, and let him work if it pleases him. For the men are idle and lazy and only sleep, so I'll pack the whole set off tomorrow, and leave the grinding of the corn to this excellent old Fuka. And after this, the farmer grew so rich that there was no end to his money, for he had no money, no men to pay, and all his corn was ground without him spending a penny. Of course, the people wondered much over his riches, but he never told them about the Fuka, or their curiosity would have spoiled the luck. Now Frederick went often to the mill and hid in the chest that he might watch the fairies at work. But he had great pity for the poor old Fuka in his tattered clothes, who yet directed everything and had hard work of it sometimes, keeping the little Fukas in order. So Frederick, out of love and gratitude, bought a fine suit of cloth and silk and laid it on one night on the floor of the mill, just where the old Fuka always stood to give his orders to the little men. And then he crept into the chest to watch. How is this? Said the Fuka when he saw the clothes. Are these for me? I shall be turned into a fine gentleman. And then he put them on and began to walk up and down, admiring himself. But suddenly he remembered the corn and went to grind as usual, then stopped and cried out, No, no, no more work for me. Fine gentlemen don't grind corn. I'll go out and see a little of the world and show my fine clothes. And he kicked away the old rags into a corner and went. No corn was ground that night, nor the next, or the next. All the little Fukas ran away, and not a sound was heard in the mill. Then Frederick grew very sorry for the loss of his old friend, and used to go out into the fields and call out, Fuka, Fuka, come back to me, let me see your face. But the old Fuka never came back, and all his life long Frederick never looked on the face of his friend again. However, the farmer had made so much money that he wanted no more help, and he sold the mill and reared up Frederick to be a great scholar and a gentleman, who had his own house and land and servants. And in time he married a beautiful lady, so beautiful that people said she must be the daughter to the king of the fairies. A strange thing happened at the wedding, for when they all stood up to drink to the bride's health, Frederick saw beside him a golden cup filled with wine, and no one knew how the golden cup had come to his hand. But Frederick guessed it was the Fuka's gift, and he drank the wine without fear and made his bride drink also. And ever after their lives were happy and prosperous, and the golden cup was kept as a treasure in the family, and the descendants of Frederick have it in their possessions to this day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ali. That was wonderful. All right, so we have one more story for you that I'll read for you. And this one is called Finn McCool and the Giant's Causeway. And apologies in advance for my terrible accent. Ulster is the most northern of Ireland's ancient kingdoms. Its landscape is fabulously beautiful. It has towering cliffs and rocky hills, winding rivers and scooped-out lakes that look like they could have been made by the hands of slightly crazed giants. There are many stone tombs here, 5,000 years old, made of enormous boulders that could not possibly be lifted by one man, or even a whole family of ordinary men. For many years, the local people have named them Giants' Graves. Stories are told of one great Irish giant, Finn MacCool, whose most fearsome enemies were the Scottish giants. Finn was so angry and determined to get at them that he built a whole causeway from Ulster across the sea to Scotland. He built it of unusual six-sided cobblestones so they would fit neatly together like a honeycomb. And they made a very pretty pavement indeed. One day, he shouted a challenge to the Scottish giant Benandonner, the Red Man, to cross the causeway and fight him. But as soon as he saw the Scot getting closer and closer on the causeway, he realized Benandonner was much, much bigger than he had imagined. Finn skedaddled back home to the fort of Allen in County Kildare and told his wife he'd picked a fight but had thought better of it now. Finn heard the stamping feet of Benandonner from Kilcock, and when those feet got to Robertstown, Finn had to stuff 5 pounds of moss into each ear. Redman's spear was as tall and thick as a round tower, and he used it to knock on the door of the fort of Allen. Finn would not answer the door, so his wife shoved him in the great bath with a couple of sheets over him. Finn's wife, Unag, thought quickly. She opened the door to Benandonner, saying, "Sure, it's a pity, but Finn is away hunting deer in County Kerry. Would you like to come in anyway and wait? I'll show you into the great hall and sit down after your journey." Unag invited Redman to look around the room and showed him what she said were some of Finn's possessions. "Would you like to put your spear down? Just there, next to Finn's." It was a huge fir tree with a pointed stone at the top. "Over there is Finn's shield." It was a block of building oak, as big as 4 chariot wheels. "Finn's late for his meal. Will you eat it if I cook his favorite?" Unag cooked a cake of griddle bread, baked with the iron griddle pressed inside it. Redman bit it hungrily and broke 3 front teeth. The meat was a strip of hard fat nailed to a block of red timber. 2 back teeth cracked. He was given a 5-gallon bucket of honey beer to drink. "Would you like to say hello to the baby?" "Wait, I'll have to feed her first." Unag threw a loaf of bread to the huge baby in the bath cradle, and peeping out from a huge sheet-like dress and bonnet was Finn MacCool himself, contentedly sucking his thumb. Benandonner said he wasn't much good with babies. The honey beer made him feel woozy, and he asked to go outside to clear his head. Unag showed Redman out, where the gardens were scattered about with boulders as tall as the giant. "Finn and his friends play catch with these rocks. Finn practices by throwing one over the fort, then running round to catch it before it falls." Of course, Redman tried, but it was so heavy he could only just lift it above his head before dropping it. The blow only ricked his neck. Luckily, the Scotsman's head was very hard, but it was also full of good sense. He thanked Unag for her hospitality and said he would wait no longer, but return to Scotland before the tide came in. Finn leapt from his cradle, thanked Unag for her shrewdness, and chased Benandonner out of Ireland. Passing Portadown, County Antrim, Finn scooped a huge clod of earth out of the ground to fling at the retreating Scot. The hole filled up with water and became the biggest loch in Ireland, Lough Neagh. The clod he flung missed its target and landed in the middle of the Irish Sea. It became the Isle of Man. And both giants tore up the Giant's Causeway, just leaving the ragged ends at the 2 shores. And if you go to the north coast of Ulster, or to Staffa, the nearest isle of Scotland, you may visit them today. The ends of the beautiful causeway, that is, not the giants. Those giants are long since in their graves. Thank you. That was the last of our stories and poems for today. Before we all tune out and head home, I would just want to acknowledge all of our wonderful readers for their brilliant work and brilliant performances of these stories. They worked really hard to prepare them for you. So let me go ahead and share my screen here for the credits slide. All right, and our lovely narrators on the call, when I call your name, feel free to give a little wave or turn on your cameras for a second to say hello. So these are our lovely cast members. First up, we have Olivia Bernard, who read for you St. Patrick's Day and the Lake Isle of Innisfree. Yay. All right, and next up, we have Mallory Hallworth, who read The Fairy Dance for you. Mallory is also one of our new members to the club, so welcome, Mallory. All right, and next up, we have Hannah Davies, who read The Leprechaun or Fairy Shoemaker. Yay. And next up, we have Bailey Roberts, reading The Harp of Dagda. Bailey is also one of our new members, so welcome, Bailey. All right, and next up we have Ali Imran reading The Fairy Help the Fuka for you. Ali is our third new member to the club, so welcome, Ali, as well. And then my name is Genevieve Feaster, and I read Finn McCool and the Giant's Causeway. Thank you so much to everyone again for tuning in. We really appreciate it. We hope you enjoyed these performances and stories, and a very, very happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone tuning in. Thank you so much and have a wonderful night.